Archaeology claims the human story is complete. We are told that the timeline of our species is a solved puzzle. We dig up a bone, we date the sediment it was found in, and we place it neatly into a glass case with a label that fits the textbook narrative. We are told that evolution is a straight line, a ladder climbing from the primitive darkness of the past into the light of the modern human. But what if the ladder is broken? What if there is one discovery, one single impossible set of remains that refuses to fit into the box? A discovery so scientifically offensive, so geologically terrifying, that the academic world has tried to erase it from the record, not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. We are not talking about the Star Child skull. We are not talking about the giants of ancient myths. We are talking about a forensic impossibility, a skeleton that exists in 3 different times at once. If this skeleton is real, then carbon dating is a lie, stratigraphy is an illusion, and the entire map of human evolution collapses into chaos. This is the story of the Polystratum man, and it is the story they do not want you to hear. To understand the horror of this discovery, you must understand the golden rule of geology, the law of superposition. It is simple. The deeper you dig, the older the dirt. A layer of rock formed 100,000 years ago sits below a layer formed 10,000 years ago. It is the clock of the Earth. It does not skip, it does not reverse. But in 1974, in a remote, private mining survey in the high deserts of Nevada, the clock broke. A team of contracted surveyors was cutting a cross-section into a canyon wall, looking for copper deposits. They sliced through millions of years of geological history. And there, embedded in the rock face, they found him. At first glance, it was just a human skeleton, anatomically modern, a Homo sapiens. But as the site geologist began to map the layers, his blood ran cold. The skull of the specimen was embedded in a layer of hard-packed sedimentary clay, visually and chemically dated to the Holocene era, roughly 8 to 10,000 years old, a standard Neolithic find. But the torso, the ribcage and the spine were encased in a strata of sandstone that belonged to the Upper Pleistocene, 40,000 years ago. And the legs, the femurs, the tibias, the feet, they were locked into a layer of dense bedrock that dated back to the Aminian interglacial period, 120,000 years ago. Let that sink in. A single intact human body, one individual, dead and buried, but his head lay in the era of the first cities, his chest lay in the era of the Neanderthals, and his feet lay in a time before humans had supposedly even left Africa. This is a Polystratum fossil. In paleontology, this usually happens with trees, a trunk standing upright while mud builds up around it over years. But trees live for centuries. They do not live for 100,000 years. And humans do not die standing up while the geological epochs rise around them like rising water. If the layers are correct, this man died across a span of 110,000 years. If the skeleton is a single unit, then the layers formed instantaneously, not over millennia. Either geology is wrong, or time does not work the way we think it does. The site geologist, a man whose name has since been scrubbed from the professional registers, made the mistake of calling a university contact before calling his corporate supervisors. He described the anomaly. He sent preliminary sketches. 2 weeks later, the site was gone. Not just closed, gone. The mining company detonated the canyon wall. Tons of rubble buried the face of the cliff. The official report stated that unstable seismic activity required the immediate collapse of the survey tunnel. The box containing the initial loose bone fragments disappeared from the university's courier's van. The geologist was blacklisted, his career dissolved in a wash of silence. The academic community called it a hoax, a misinterpretation of a landslide. They buried the truth under thousands of tons of rock. But the Earth has a way of repeating its secrets. 11 years later, 1985, different continent, southern Chile. A team of volcanologists were studying the ash layers of an ancient eruption near the Andes. They were looking for climate data. They found a nightmare. In a layer of compacted volcanic tuff, perfectly preserved, was a footprint of a modern human foot. High arch, aligned toes, not an ape, not a proto-human. Us. Directly below this footprint, sealed in a layer of basaltic rock that had cooled thousands of years prior, was the fossilized remains of a megatherium, a giant ground sloth that went extinct ages ago. And beneath the sloth, encased in a strata that should have been solid rock long before the sloth was born, was a bone fragment, a human finger bone. The stratigraphy was inverted, the timeline was folded. It was the Polystratum anomaly again, but this time the organic material was fresh enough to extract organic material. The scientists on site were cautious. They didn't call the press. They ran the tests in-house. They assumed it was a mistake. They recalibrated their mass spectrometers. They retested the carbon isotopes. The results were impossible. The finger bone tested as genetically modern, but the rock it was fused into was chemically dated to a time when humanity should have been primitive scavengers. Before they could publish, the funding for the expedition was cut, an administrative error in the grant paperwork. The government of Chile, acting on advisory from a foreign intelligence agency, declared the site a protected military zone for radar testing. But the lead researcher, a woman of immense integrity, refused to let it die. She couldn't save the site, she couldn't save the bones, but she could save the data. For decades, the story was a whisper in the faculty lounges of geology departments, a ghost story told by drunk professors, the skeleton of time, the man who died twice. Then came the era of big data. In 2023, an anonymous user uploaded a massive cache of biological data to a decentralized storage network on the dark web. The folder was titled simply "The Third Incident." It contained 3D laser scans, not of the Nevada site, not of the Chile site, but of a third specimen found in a deep earth construction project in Asia. And alongside the scans were the results of a genomic sequence that shouldn't exist. They managed to sequence the DNA of the Polystratum skeleton. When you look at the genome of a modern human, you see a map of our history. We have markers from Africa. We have trace percentages of Neanderthal, sometimes Denisovan. We are a mix of the ancestors who came before us. The Polystratum DNA was 98% Homo sapiens, anatomically modern, indistinguishable from you or me. It had the standard 1% Neanderthal variants, common in Eurasian populations. But the final 1% was alien, not extraterrestrial, but alien to our tree of life. It was a genetic marker for a hominid species that appears nowhere in the fossil record, a ghost lineage. This wasn't a Denisovan. It wasn't a hobbit from Flores. It wasn't Homo heidelbergensis. It was a highly advanced, distinct species of human that lived alongside us. But here is the terrifying part.
The mutation rate of this unknown 1% suggests that this species didn't die out millions of years ago. The genetic decay, or lack thereof, indicates that this ghost hominid was alive and breeding until very recently, perhaps as recently as 8,000 years ago. The timeline of the Polystratum skeleton suggests a creature that is genetically superior to us in terms of adaptation, a species that could live in the deep past yet possesses DNA that looks like the future. When the 2023 leak occurred, the reaction was swift and silent. 2 digital archives that hosted the mirror files were taken offline by distributed denial of service attacks. The IP addresses of the uploaders were traced, and then silence. But one man, a retired anatomist, 72 years old, claimed to be part of the original team that analyzed the 3rd specimen, broke the silence on an encrypted form. He wrote, "We were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements not to protect national security, but to protect the timeline. The skeleton proves that we are wrong about everything. We are trying to fit a non-linear phenomenon into a linear history book." So what does this mean? Why is this finding so dangerous that it warrants 3 separate cover-ups on 3 different continents? If the Polystratum skeleton is real, it implies one of 3 terrifying possibilities. First, the Earth's geological layers are not laid down linearly over millions of years. Catastrophic events, massive floods, crustal displacements, rapid sedimentation can create millions of years of geology in a matter of days. This would mean the history of our planet is far, far shorter and far more violent than we are told. Second, time is not fixed. We assume we move from past to future, but quantum physics hints that time is a fluid dimension. Could these anomalies be evidence of temporal bleed-through? Individuals or objects slipping through the cracks of reality, dying in one era and being buried in another. A glitch in the matrix of the physical world. Or third, and most unsettling, the history of humanity is cyclical, not linear. We assume we are the first advanced civilization, but the Polystratum skeleton suggests that modern humans, people with our brains, our DNA, our capabilities, have existed for hundreds of thousands of years longer than admitted. Perhaps the 120,000-year-old legs belong to a civilization that rose and fell before our history even began. Perhaps the 40,000-year-old ribs are the survivors of a great cataclysm who had to start over. And the final 10,000-year-old skull belongs to the final generation that forgot who they were. The skeleton is not one man. It is a monument to the cycles of our destruction. A single biological entity that proves we have been here before. We have risen before. And we have fallen before. This is why they hide it. Imagine the collapse of academic authority if it was proven that the dating methods are flawed. Imagine the political chaos if we realized that land rights and history are based on a false narrative of time. Imagine the panic if we understood that our current civilization is just another layer of sediment waiting to happen. It is fear. Fear of rewriting the textbooks. Fear of losing the grants. Fear of admitting that the official science does not control what lies beneath the ground. They want you to believe the story is finished. They want you to believe you are the apex of evolution. But the Earth tells a different story. It tells us of a human who walked on the bedrock of the deep past, who breathed the air of the Ice Age, and who died in the dawn of the modern era. If a human being can exist outside of his own time, if distinct human species can bleed into one another across the eons, If the very ground beneath our feet is a chaotic archive of forgotten timelines, then we have to ask the final question. What else is down there? What other anomalies are trapped in the stone waiting for a drill bit to expose them to the light? And when we find them, will we be brave enough to look? Or will we let them bury the truth again? The Polystratum man is waiting, and he is not alone.